Welcome to How to Belong, the podcast that delves into the human quest to find a sense of belonging in what can often feel like a lonely world. Join us as we talk to guests who've navigated their own unique paths, what we like to call their hero journeys, from feeling like they don't fit in, to the profound realisation that true belonging can only ever be found from within. I'm Naomi E Lloyd, and this is the How to Belong podcast. I am so excited because I've got a friend with me here today, and actually she's a recent friend. I hope she doesn't mind me saying that. But I don't know if you can relate to this, but I met this lady at a networking event. Didn't know anybody, but I'm not somebody who gets really worried about walking into a room where I don't know people. I don't know what's wrong with me like that, but I quite like it. I quite like the challenge. But really the challenge for me is, who can I connect with today? Who can I exchange interesting information with? Whether that's me exchanging something useful to them or vice versa. Maybe it's a little bit the witchy side of me. I don't know. But that day I really had this feeling I might meet somebody interesting. And it turned out not only was she interesting, but she was really inspiring, because actually the conversation was a big part of what made me want to set this podcast up. I knew I wanted to do something, but I hadn't quite fine-tuned it. And Jodie sort of gave me all the little ingredients to make that. There was such a cliche going on, to make that little belonging cake that I was trying to come up with. So just to explain, I'm in a networking group, and I sit down and I look around, and this lovely person walks in and she's looking around for a seat. And I did that thing where I nudged up just a little bit to sort of indicate there's a place here. And she came straight over and I introduced myself. But Jodie, I will introduce you properly to in a minute, Jodie was amazing because you know what she did? She didn't just say, I'm Jodie, I work for, I do this. She said, I'm Jodie, I'm a proud lesbian and I'm here as a volunteer for Pride Portsmouth. I'm also a LinkedIn expert and I help brands get their businesses noticed. But what was really interesting about that, she didn't start with, I'm a LinkedIn expert, which, by the way, she is amazing at and has got an incredible business growing and community around that. She started with what her sense of belonging was immediately. And it was, Jodie, I'm a proud lesbian and I'm a volunteer for Portsmouth Pride. And I really like to give back to the local Portsmouth community because it means a lot to me. And I just thought that was incredible. And I knew there was a really big story here and I was very inspiring. So that's why Jodie and I are sitting here today and we're going to talk about this, because I really want to know from Jodie about her journey, share it with you, and for me as well, to learn how she got to that place, because I know it hasn't always been easy. So welcome to How to Belong, Jodie. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
It's very hot. It's very hot.
Is. Yeah, it's really hot.
But last in the UK, we finally have some sunshine.
And now we moan about it.
And now we moan about it, yeah.
We're too hot. But yeah, I remember that day really well. And I remember that the seat next to you was empty. And I'm not one of those people that would sit, like, you know, some people sit down, they leave an empty seat next to them. And I remember saying to you, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to leave this seat empty. Do you mind if I actually sit next to you and then introduce myself? And I actually genuinely remember that we almost couldn't stop talking, could we? Because we kind of clicked straight away. And we were there to watch, obviously, the seminars that were happening. But we were almost waiting for the seminar thing to stop so we could continue chatting again. And we realised we had a lot of kind of, when it came to the belonging piece, not in common. And I think it was that day that I'd actually introduced you to Steve, wasn't it? Like on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and that's how this podcast was born.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I really remember thinking, must not be rude, as somebody put a lot of work into this seminar. Okay, she's finished, let's talk.
Yeah.
So, Jodie, I know from our conversation, obviously the listeners don't, so let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
First of all, you're really successful in this fantastic business you're doing. I know you've got a really great partner and community around you. You ooze confidence, and not just confidence in ways that we might expect about, you know, being able to speak on a podcast like this and do all these things, but just about your identity and who Jodie is and what that means. What do you think 13-year-old Jodie would think now?
Yeah, and it's a funny one, and we've obviously spoken about this many times in our many catch-ups, but it genuinely, people meet me and I think they're like, wow, this woman is really confident and really outgoing, but that has not always been the case. When I was 13, I had no sense of belonging, no identity. I didn't know who I was. I had a rough idea of who I thought I was, but without obviously going into too much, because I know we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it, if you like. I was really struggling, and I was so unconfident. I couldn't speak to I definitely wouldn't speak to a stranger. And if I knew then that I would be who I am now, I would be like, there's no way that's me. Like, absolutely not. And I actually had, and I'm not afraid to share it, I had some therapy recently, because the younger version of me, when I think back, actually used to bring me quite a lot of trauma, because I'd think, oh God, that poor girl, she really struggled with no identity. And actually, through that therapy, I've realised that version, I wouldn't be who I am today without that 13-year-old girl going through what she went through to get where she is. So she would not believe me, and she probably wouldn't have even spoke to me, because she would have been too shy and unconfident to have a conversation in the first place.
I love that image you just sort of given us there, because we do talk about this inner child sometimes now.
Yeah.
It's become more common to talk about it, and I think it's brilliant. But when you first talked to me about you at 13, I did have this whole picture, and I could relate to it as well. It's such an awkward time in life, and there's so much going on. But for you what you told me, could you explain to us how it felt feeling so different from people around you, and what in this emerging adolescence of fancying boys and putting posters on the wall and all the things that you were supposed to do that made you think, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to.
Yeah. And things were so different back then, right, as well, like to what they are now. And when I think back to how I felt at that point, obviously as a teenager, you start to feel hormones, and, you start to think about things. And, all of my friends were, I say all of my friends, I actually didn't have many friends, in all honesty, because I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, just because I was so unconfident, and it really had a big impact on my mental health. Like I say, I had no identity, so I didn't know who I was. It was really difficult. So I was battling with the thoughts of, going through all of those hormones that we get, and not understanding, why don't I want to chase the boys around the playground? Why don't I want a boyfriend? The kind of the playground talk, as it was back then when you were younger, was all like, oh, I really fancy, so-and-so, and, I'm going to get this person to be my boyfriend at the disco. And I genuinely didn't have those feelings at all. And then I started to have some really strange feelings, actually, when I realised that I started to find women attractive, and I wanted to be the boyfriend, is how I'd probably say it. And I didn't understand that. And I was like, that's wrong. I can't feel like that. Because when I was younger, and, many people that I'm sure are the same at my age, I'm nearly 38, there was no education around, being queer and lesbian, gay, trans, etc. back then. So having those feelings, I didn't understand them, because society had almost made it impossible for you to know that that was an okay way to feel. So I thought there was something mentally wrong with me, and that had a real deep impact on me that I, still probably struggle with today, because, I had to have these thoughts and feelings about, well, I don't want to kiss boys, I want to kiss girls, but nobody's allowed to do that, and it's wrong. And thinking one day someone's going to find out that I feel that way, and I'm going to get sent to, a mental institute somewhere because you're not allowed to do that. And that was really difficult. So, and I think, I said to you when we've been talking about this, later then, I won't go into the story because I know we'll cover it, but coming out years later, I've actually only lived 19 years of my life, and I'm 38 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's just pause a little bit there, because that's a big thing to say.
Yeah.
You feel you've only lived 19 years of your life, so you've lost a significant amount.
I lost so much, because there was, I had to fight with the feeling for many years of these feelings that society was telling me from everything that I was taking in as a growing child that were wrong. So I was genuinely convinced that if I ever told anyone that I felt this way, it would reveal that I wasn't right, and I would be, taken away from my family and probably thrown somewhere or whatever. So it was really difficult. And then to add to that, I was growing up around people having conversations using the word, dyke, and apologies if that offends anyone. I know some people hate that word, but it's an important part of my story. And I heard people that I really care about saying how, they were disgusting, and they'd seen them in the street. And then I started to think, well, is that me? Because from what I could find, there was nothing anywhere to educate me. So I kind of had to go on what I could find. And I spent so many years of my life struggling with what to wear because I didn't want to wear dresses. I wanted to wear, shorts and, Ninja Turtle t-shirts and things like that. And I didn't want to wear bows in my hair. And, at one point, my mum even let me cut my hair off short because I told her that, I think I even had a conversation with her at one point telling her that I was a boy in a previous life. And it was really difficult because I just didn't understand those thoughts and feelings, and there was nobody around me that could give me any guidance on how I felt. So until I came out, which was at the age of 19, so kind of that year of the 19th year of my life was that was the changing point of my life that I'll kind of almost never forget. But all of those years leading up to that, I just felt I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't relate to anybody. I didn't care about myself and my appearance because I felt like I said, I felt like I was going to get found out for being something that people wouldn't accept, and that I was, going to be a failure in everyone else's eyes, kind of thing.
I mean, it's such a profound realization for you. But what's interesting, I hear that, and it makes me so sad for you that you feel that those are lost years. But I hope it's okay to say this. There's another side of me that feels there's a real yin and yang to that, because the other side of it is so enriching. Yeah. In a way that I do wonder if many of us that maybe don't have such a strong contrast haven't got either side of that.
Yeah, that's a really good
I'm
point.
not sure I have.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been in sort of up and down ripple, but never quite reaching either side. Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it's really good to have these conversations because it's such a different experience. Yeah. I do want to go back a little bit again, though, because we are going to come to that pivotal moment when you did come out. But I really remember this story. And I know that you have a certain, I wouldn't even call it a crush, an admiration, a love for a certain member of the Spice Girls. Yeah. And I remember thinking when you asked me which one it would be, I knew who it would be. Yeah. But can you take us through why I might be bringing that up now in terms of how it gave you a bit more of a clue that... Yeah.
And that is a really pivotal part of my, coming out story, I guess, and my story of belonging. So obviously, 38 nearly. So when I was... God, I don't know, I can't even do the quick maths there of how old I would have been, but the Spice Girls had basically just come out, and I had a best friend at the time, and I hadn't even kind of said anything to him about these feelings and thoughts that I'd had, but it was very apparent that I was a tomboy at that point. It would be it would be a shock to people if I'd worn a skirt or a dress or whatever, because I was always in trousers or shorts. So we were obviously doing the things that, we do when we're that age, and we were watching, it's probably like The Box, I think it was called, and all of that we had. Yeah. And there was the Spice Girls were just coming out, and we were having a sleepover, and we were talking about our favourite Spice Girls, and mine was always Sporty, literally from the start. Sporty Spice was, I don't know why, I just really kind of gravitated towards her. I loved that, the other four were like super girly, and she was just like, no, I'm going to wear tracksuit bottoms and like top and t-shirts. And I really resonated with that. And that was the first time for me that I actually, I guess, found somebody that I felt like I connected with, because I lived in tracksuits and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, well, these other four girls are actually quite girly, and this one is breaking that trend and saying that it's okay to dress like that. So I thought she was just so cool. I loved everything about her, and she was my favourite Spice Girl. And one night we had a sleepover, and we were just chatting about Spice Girls, and I think Say You'll Be There was just about to come out, so we were like, oh my God, what do you think the music video is going to be like and all of that? And I said to my friend, I'm going to tell you something. And he said, what? And I said, I think I would kiss Sporty Spice. And he was like, but that would make you a lesbian. And that was the first time I'd actually really heard the word lesbian. I didn't really know kind of what it was and what it meant. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, well, lesbians kiss other girls. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then that kind of planted a seed. And that was the first conversation. And that actually, sparked my first crush, if you like, because I was like, okay, like I really, and I think it was admiration and kind of a crush at the same time. Like, yes, I wanted to kiss her, but also I just thought she was amazing because she was really standing out of that norm that was it was a box people were in at that point, where it was basically girls were girly, men were manly, and it was either side. Whereas she kind of came out and was like, it's okay to wear a ponytail and wear tracksuit bottoms and trainers all the time, and you can do that and you can still be cool. So
she was and still is very cool.
Oh yeah, she is, and still to this day, you know, however many years that is later, I absolutely idolise her, because I just love that she's just herself, and you know, she's found her place to belong, and she just doesn't care, and she's such an awesome person. But yeah, that was the start of it.
Could you just say, Sporty Spice, if you're listening to this, in a dream world fantasy that I like to create of an ending gown, you know, would you like to meet Jodie? I mean, she's clearly one of your massive fans.
Yeah, she knows who I am, which I think is really cool.
Oh,
yeah. So my I don't want to use the word obsession because it makes me sound like a psycho. But
no,
I've been
a passion.
It's my passion. That's it.
Cool.
I've been a fan of hers since my younger ages, and due to how I grew up, and my parents didn't have much money at all, so I didn't ever get to see the Spice Girls perform. So when they reunited years later and I was actually an adult, I could not believe that I was watching my idols like on a stage. But I've been to every gig pretty much that she's done in the UK, because she's had like 8 or 9 solo albums now. And I've met her in person, like at meet and greets. And yeah, I've got a couple of videos I'll have to show you when we finish this, but where she's like, this question's from Jodie. Oh, I know you, Jodie, don't I? And then carries on. And that gives me so much life, because I'm like, if 13-year-old me would know that she knew my name, it would blow my mind. But yeah, I've met her a few times, and yeah, it kind of started off as my, you know, my idol, and she's always been my idol kind of ever since, really. But yeah, that was the first time we'd had that conversation.
Do you know what's really interesting about hearing you talk about this is that it makes me think differently about the teenage crushes and idols, because they probably have a lot more impact than we realise. I mean, Taylor Swift, for example, at the moment, we're recording this just as Taylor Swift has done this huge tour in London, and it's clearly going to be such an impact on so many young minds, as our Sporty Spice or the Spice Girls in general were for you. And I just think, like, you know, keep going, people in the music industry, and keep being those idols for people, because and those positive role models, because I mean, I love Dolly Parton, and I still do.
No, my girlfriend does. She loves Dolly.
Since being a child, I've always loved Dolly, and I'm determined to get to Nashville. So anyway, it's good to have role models and people that inspire them, particularly when they're sending out such fantastic messages.
And that whole girl power movement was just it was just amazing for women, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was just such a pivotal moment where you were like, hang on a minute, no, we don't need men to actually be successful. And they made that movement just from like, you know, and it's just, I really respect all of them for what they did and what they still do now. Like, they're still, you know, they still champion lots of really important causes. Like, you know, Melanie C, who is Sporty Spice, does so much for the LGBTQ plus community. She's aware of the impact that she's had on men. I am one of many that had the same, you know, kind of feeling as that. She does so much for the community. And yeah, they're just, that whole movement was just incredible, and I can appreciate it more now as an adult as well.
I think I agree with you about that, because at the time I was very much more into rock music. But we always had that conversation around which of them do you associate with, and I think for me, I wasn't sure. Typical me, I would switch my lanes left, right, and centre. But because Mel B had a strong Bradford accent, I'm like, well, she's my girl. But I wasn't quite sure about the scary element of it. You know? And so then, I probably dressed a bit more like Posh Spice, and I had the whole bob. So I was a bit like, I'm somewhere between Mel B and Posh Spice.
But that was good, wasn't it? Because it also made people start to think, well, you don't have to fit one pigeonhole.
Love it.
Like, you can be this, you can be that, and you can be who you want to be. And I think for the world, that was a real big, like, it genuinely was. For the LGBTQ plus community, the Spice Girls were a huge impact, because they started to make people realise that we already knew that. I didn't at that point, but people that were already out and proud knew that you could be whoever you wanted to be. But they started to be like, who cares? Just be who you want to be. And that was their main message. Like, you want to dress like a woman and you're a man, do it. You know, vice versa, do it. Do you, and just do what you want to do. And that was what I loved about them. And that was kind of what started to really kind of, it didn't make it any easier, don't get me wrong, to kind of come out. But yeah, I just love all of that movement.
This is so good. We're not planning to have this huge conversation about the Spice Girls, but I feel like all these light bulbs are going popping up, because I used to think, well, why is it on a Friday night that I'll put like the tie-dyes and the Doc Martens on and go to like a heavy metal place in Bradford? By the way, I know that that's not what you're meant to dress like, but it was my version of it, because that's what I do. And then on the other night, I'd go out into where it's more clubby night, and I would just be a chameleon. And I think I've always been like that. But there was something about the fact that you could potentially go, well, tonight I'm Mel B, or tonight I'm
tonight Matthew.
Start in the eyes. That's very much a UK reference.
Yeah.
I love this. That's all the light bulbs. So let's get back to you moving forward. So you had that moment with the sleepover, and you painted such a fantastic picture of it. You then get to 19, and a whole party stage erupted for you. But because you made a huge decision, and you decided to come out.
Yeah. So I struggled, and I mean that, and also just to say to anyone listening to this podcast that is like, yes, I get this. Like, I feel you, because it's so difficult, and people don't understand how difficult it is to be yourself and come out and say it, because you battle and you it's just really tough. So anyone that's listening that's been there and done it, like, I applaud you, because, you know, having been there, done it, I know it's tough. Yeah, so at 19, slightly, rewinding very slightly, so it was kind of between turning 18 and becoming 19 that I had two really close friends that I would hang out with, and they were kind of the first, you know, kind of teenage friends that, if you like, that I had, and we'd hang around together and we'd listen to. Do you remember we were laughing about this the other day, the old Ministry of Sound CD albums, and you'd get like 3 CDs in a pack. There was always one CD that was better, but and then we'd sneak this was probably as rebellious as I got, because my surname is Goodchild, and I was a good child by nature. Like, I never did anything bad. My sister, on the other hand, was the one that did all the naughty things. But we had like a Bacardi Breezer, obviously everyone remembers those, and we'd sit and listen to Clubland and we'd talk. And one day they were like, oh, can we pluck your eyebrows? Because I had huge eyebrows, like caterpillar eyebrows.
Love it.
So I let them pluck my eyebrows, and then they were like, oh, should we go do some shopping? And I kind of didn't really know what to look for, because I didn't understand it. But I really felt I bonded with these two, and they were brothers. And one night they'd said, we were going somewhere, I think we were talking, and one of them I felt really comfortable to talk to, and he had just come out as gay. And I was like, okay. So I was really interested in that. And because I felt comfortable with him, I could ask questions. And we got talking about it, and I felt comfortable enough for the first time to actually say out loud, I think I might identify as perhaps bisexual, which at the point I didn't want to admit to anyone that I didn't like boys and that I just like girls. So the easiest way for me to kind of start having that conversation was to say, oh, I think I do like boys, but I think I like girls as well, because I felt that was going to be more accepted than just saying I don't like boys at all. They repulse me and I just like girls. So I tried to go in easier. I went home and I thought, I really need to tell my mum this, because I didn't like keeping secrets. And I also didn't, I'd met all of these amazing people that had also encouraged me that you should be yourself and don't hide that, and I'd thought about it a lot, and I thought, no, I'm going to tell my mum. And I sat her down, and I just honestly remember absolutely cacking myself, because I thought, I don't know what she's going to say. And she actually said, I know.
Right.
And I was like, what? She was like, I've known for a long time. And I think it's a phase. I think you're going through a bit of a phase. You probably grow out of it, but I've kind of known that you've probably felt that way. And she'd found, at this point, I might have had a girlfriend, and I think she'd found a card that they'd given me and some flowers, and I'd taken the flowers in, but hid the card in my pocket. But obviously my mum did my washing, and it said, something on the card, and then the girl's name. So obviously she was like, okay, I know. And so, I felt better from having that conversation. When I told my dad, I know he wouldn't mind me sharing this, but he was like, so you want to be a bloke? And I was like, no. And he was like, so you're going to start basically being a man? And I was like, absolutely not. No, I'm happy being a woman. And it's just that I like women, and that's not going to change who I am. My sister was absolutely fine with it. She was like, why do you need to tell me? Like, that's fine. Like, just be who you want to be. If anyone's got a problem with it, I'll knock them out. Kind of, that was her. Like, even though she's my little sister, we've almost got that. I'm the big sister, she's the little sister, but she almost acts more like the big sister to me. So that was nice to know. And she was like, I literally don't care. Like, I'm whatever. As long as you're happy, I don't care. Unfortunately, my grandparents had passed away at this point, so I wasn't able to tell them. But I just felt then I could kind of almost be honest about where I was going, what I was doing and everything, and it was fine. And I actually decided at that point as well that I was going to move out. So I moved out of I grew up in Lee Park, and I moved in straight away with a girl, obviously. My first proper girlfriend, if you like, and I moved in with her, and moved into Portsmouth. So again, I could make sure I could go out as much as I could. And yeah, it was all like kind of, yeah. So 19 for me was when I started to obviously understand who I was and that it was okay. But that doesn't mean that from that day it was an instant I belong.
No.
And I think I said to you when we spoke about this recently, it actually is probably only the last 2 years that I've really understood who I am and found like I understand why I operate in the way that I do and who I am. And I still don't think I'm quite there yet, which is just crazy when you think about it, I guess, isn't it?
I don't think it is crazy because I think it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
And I think because we change all the time anyway.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately, I guess, as long as you keep belonging to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is as well that you'll have had all that time in your teenage years where you had this, I really don't know who I am. I feel guilty about things that I don't understand. All that. And then you finally get into this, the whole world opens up to you.
Yeah.
Like you've entered this whole space where you are in your element and this feels good and you're accepted. And that, is understandable that you went through. You were probably a few years behind. Not behind, is I'm trying to think of a better way of saying it, other people that had been already going out and experimenting and exploring. So it's a bit like, I think about my teenage boys that were locked down for a few years during COVID. And then when they came out, oh my goodness. They had to cram in like 18 months worth. It was terrifying as a parent. Like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But that's human nature. Of course, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But then, of course, moving on a bit into your 20s and 30s, you entered the world of professional work. So this opens up a whole new element to the story. And I don't know if you're happy to share a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. So as and a lot, again, if there's any LGBTQ plus people listening, I'm sure you can relate to this, but we often find that is what people, it's almost, that's our personality. It's not, when I've worked in my corporate life, I started in my professional job. I was really good at it. But what people kind of associated with my personality is that I was a lesbian. Mm-hmm. So it was almost like, oh, Jodie's a lesbian. Like, let's get Jodie out. She's a lesbian. In fact, to the point, and I'm happy to share this, and I'm not offended by it now as an adult, but my nickname at work was Les because I was a lesbian, and it's still stuck to this day, which is fine. I've got my 3 best friends that, I've known for, nearly 20 years. They still call me Les, but it's because of the fact that was what they saw as my personality. And I've struggled with that throughout my whole career. I've been, I've always been a top performer in the roles that I've had. And I've always been, a strong leader, but that's always come second to the fact that I'm a lesbian. And that's the first talking point. When I meet people and I'll talk about my partner, and then when they realise I've got a girlfriend, they'll be like, oh my God, I've always wondered, like, how does a female to female relationship work? And they just start asking all these questions, which is fine because they want to be educated. But when I meet somebody, so when I met you for the first time and you said you're married, I don't go, oh my God, I've always wondered, like, how does a woman and a man, like, how do things happen there? Yeah. Like, what's it like being married to a man? Like, that must be really difficult because it's just like, it's crazy, but it happens. And then there's the whole other side of that, that's the professional part. But then another thing that people don't realise is that, I was talking to Dave Humphreys, the CEO of Shaping Portsmouth recently, who's a massive ally. Absolutely love Dave and what he's trying to do in the city to make it as inclusive as possible. But he was saying when I was talking to him about lived experiences and how, if I'm at the pub, and with you and your husband, if you and your husband kiss, nobody's going to bat an eyelid. If me and my partner share a kiss, everybody looks.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And you have to live your whole life with that. And it's just really difficult because then it makes public displays of affection really awkward because you want to kiss your partner or hold hands or, sometimes you might even want to, give them a little bum slap or something. But you can't because you get noticed. Whereas for, straight couples, they can just do that and they don't even have to think. But for LGBTQ plus and our community, we can't do those things. And some people just think, and I do, I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But then when I do care is when I get, met with derogatory things, which is the next stage. So if there's, if it's just having a coffee and that happens, you might get a couple of people that look and like, oh, there's a couple of lesbians over there. And even more so because myself and my partner don't fit the society's version of what they think lesbians should look like. So it's even more of a shock.
What do you mean by that?
So I think if you said to somebody like, what does a lesbian look like? They would say short hair, wears men's clothes, and that would be what people think a lesbian look like. But lesbians come in all shapes and sizes.
As all people do.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yet people can't comprehend that. And they think, so that's what makes it difficult for me and my partner, because we both are very, feminine presenting. So you see two feminine people kiss. When you're having a coffee, that's one thing. People will look because they're like, that's not normal. It's just like, what is normal? If you take that and put it into a setting where there's alcohol.
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh my God. Naomi, it's horrendous. And it makes,
Do people want to see if they can change you?
Yep. So you kiss, and then within seconds, it's almost like a magnet. You get some, and I know not all men like this. So for the ones listening that aren't, I know you're there, but some of them will just come over and they'll be like, oh, look at these lesbians. And then they'll be like, oh, are you two together? Let me have a go. Let me join in. And then they just won't leave you alone for the night then. And the amount of times, even in gay bars, I get this. I was even in HB a few months ago, and a guy kind of tried to chat me up. I said, look, appreciate it, but actually, you're in a gay bar, but I'm actually gay. And then he said, no,
read the room.
Read the room. Yeah, read the room. If you come into the wrong place to try and find women. And he was like, yeah, but you don't look gay. And I was like, but no, there isn't a look of gay. Like people come in all shapes and sizes, the same as straight women. Like you're making an assumption there. And he just would not leave me alone. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer, and actually said, well, if you had a night with me, you would see why you should be with men. And it just infuriates me. And luckily I was with some really good girlfriends who were like, they could see I was starting to get frustrated. So they kind of diffused the situation and kind of, basically, I actually think in the end we had to get the bouncers to throw them out.
Right.
They just wouldn't leave me alone. And in what world is that acceptable?
It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And it's all that energy that's been taken up with all this stuff. It's absolutely ridiculous. We should have moved on from this by now.
Yeah.
And you were in a gay bar as well, so you'd think that these sort of things shouldn't be happening, but yet it's part of that journey that I guess it happens in so many different ways. I mean, I know it's not the same thing, but perhaps you can see where I'm going with it. But it's partly why I haven't always been that upfront about the fact that I wear hearing aids. Yeah, because people make an assumption about that.
Yep.
And I'm trying. I don't think I'm not going to use the word coming out because I know it's not applied in this case. But I'm trying to be more upfront about this now because yes, I have long hair, and I'm a lot of people say, oh, you'd never know, you get away with it. But it's partly because in the past, if that has come up, I would get stupid comments sometimes of people like, I don't know if I can explain it very well over audio. Where they go, sorry. That they pretend that they couldn't hear me, like the whole deaf joke. And it's bizarre. Because actually, how am I supposed to respond to that? Do you want me to laugh? It's not funny.
Or comments like, oh, it's fallen on deaf ears.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
I know.
And it's comments like I'll get comments as well. Oh, that's so gay. Like literally yesterday I was out in Palmerston Road having a beer and there was a group of lads and they were like, oh, you're so gay. Like, and I'm sat there thinking, you just don't. And the thing is, they don't mean it when they say it. They're not educated, but it's just being more aware of what's going on around you, isn't it? And understanding. But I resonate deeply with your story because whilst it's, it's a different subject, it is actually a lot of the same because, you're trying to, you fit in, you've made an assumption, you fit me into a box. Suddenly you don't see me in the same way now. Yeah. I don't want to be like that anymore because that is not me. I'm betraying myself by not being true to myself and being prepared to stand up almost for other people in the same situation. Yeah. And that's what it's about. Yeah, exactly. And that's
my journey that I'm on partly by meeting you, Jodie.
Yeah, exactly. So, and doing this, like raising the awareness of it, and that's why I do what I do with Portsmouth Pride. And I've, worked with them for nearly 18 months, just getting out into the community and raising awareness of making people aware. Like Dave at Shaping Portsmouth had said, if it wasn't for the video that I shared in Lesbian Visibility Week about the public displays of affection, he was like, I'd never would have even thought about that. But because I haven't needed to. So now you've brought that to the surface, I'm like, that's actually a really valid point. And how sad is it that she has to do, and I have to do that for the rest of my life. Like going to the doctors, that's another prime example. I recently, had a surgery on my arm and I had to do a pregnancy test. Obviously, I understand, they need to do that, but it was the way that they kind of went about it. When I go to the doctors, every time they say, is there any way you can be pregnant? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, how can you be so sure? And I'm like, well, I'm a lesbian. And I have to come out to the doctor every single time I go. There's only been once where I've gone in and he said, I'm not going to ask you about pregnancy because I can see on your record it says that you identify as a lesbian. And I actually stopped him and said, can I just say, in however many years I've been going to the doctors, you're the first doctor who's ever said that. And that means so much to me. Oh. And he was like,
well done to that doctor. I know, done.
I know.
That is really, really
Yeah. But yeah, the
good.
amount of when I was in the hospital, I couldn't fault them for the surgery and everything. But when they said about the pregnancy test, they didn't explain it properly. So they said, we need to do a pregnancy test. And I was like, well, look, I'm a lesbian. So, there's no way that I'm pregnant. And the lady actually laughed. And she was like, well, you still need to have a pregnancy test because there's a chance you could be pregnant. And I was like, well, there's really not. Because, yeah. But if she'd said, look, I understand you identify as a lesbian, so this is probably quite an awkward thing, but to be safe, before we do surgery, we do have to still do a pregnancy test because whilst I understand and take your word for the fact that, you're not pregnant, I hope you can understand that, we just need to be, cautious and blah, blah. And I would have been fine. But she actually laughed. And just before I went into my surgery, I actually felt like I was going to cry because she made me feel, she just didn't care. It was almost like, well, you could still be pregnant. And I was like, well, I couldn't because I'm a lesbian. But it's just the way that she dealt with it. And that's the thing, in my life, I have to live my life going through it and always having to, have that conversation. Like when I meet somebody new and I start talking about my partner, oh, well, what does he do?
Yeah.
So then you have to have the whole awkward, you have to breathe in and be like, come on, you can do this. And you kind of take a deep breath and go, oh, she does this. And they're like, oh, I would have never said you were a lesbian. Oh my God, I'm shocked. For the people that can't see, I'm slapping my forehead because you're face palm.
I'm rolling my eyes and
Yeah, but unfortunately we do, people have got a societal version of what normal is. And for those of us that don't fit in that, that's something we have to deal with pretty much every single day of our lives. And it lives with you forever, which, is difficult to, but then at some point, like I am now, I'm just like, I'll tell everyone and anyone because I don't care. One, because I want other people, if they listen to me talking and they're like, wow, she's so brave, I can do that, I can come out, that's important to me. But also because life is too short and this is my life and I'm doing things that make me happy and people don't have to accept that and they might not like it. That's fine. If you don't like it, fair enough, you live your life, I'll live mine. But I'm living my life now unapologetically. I think that's the right word.
It is the word. It absolutely is the word.
And yeah, I don't care if people don't like me, then
I think everybody I've ever come across who comes across you thinks you're amazing. And as I said, I will say it again, you inspired me. And, I know we're not meant to walk around as little human robots giving elevator pictures of who we are. But you kind of had a version of that was inspiring because you the first thing that came was that you were there as a volunteer for something that you believed in.
Yeah.
And you caveated that with because this is my identity. And then you went, and I also am here for the business that I'm doing exceptionally well in as well. Yeah. And the way you ordered things, that was what was inspiring for me.
Yeah. And you know what? I think going back to the whole, what would 13-year-old me say to me now or vice versa? Yeah. When I was having my kind of therapy, and actually just to mention her, it was a lady called, who Sandy Doyle, who does hypnotherapy. And I can't recommend Sandy enough because she genuinely helped me with something that I didn't even know I needed help with.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we started talking about it that I realised that if I hadn't have gone through all of those things, I wouldn't be half the woman that I am today. But also because of the way that I grew up and the struggles that I had, I now realise as a woman that not an older woman, mature lady, I guess. I don't know how you'd say
I
it.
don't know if you'd call yourself.
I don't know if I'd call myself that.
Please don't call
you
yourself
know what
that,
I mean?
'cause I'm
Like, but that's why I get so much from helping people. And that's what my passion is. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I worked in a corporate role where I was earning amazing money, and I didn't even have to check my bank account. If I wanted something, I'd buy it. But I was miserable.
Yeah.
So starting my own business gave me the luxury to be like, right, well, if I do this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can do things that really make an impact to help people. And that sense of helping others gives me more than any money could ever give. And I realise now from the therapy with Sandy that the reason that I get so much from that is because I wish I had somebody to help me back then. So that's how it kind of now translates to me as an adult, is that's why I get so much enjoyment from helping people. So also understanding that has, again, given me another boost of that belonging, because that wasn't something I understood until Sandy kind of spoke about it with me and kind of helped me understand that. And I came out of that session and I went from, thinking about that smaller version of Jodie and crying because it upset me so much that she struggled, to now thinking back and actually being really proud and thinking about it in a happy way, because I'm like, all of that stuff was worth it, because who would I have been if I hadn't have gone through that?
Well, that is absolutely the case.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be the same person. We wouldn't be having the conversation now, and you will be helping people who are listening to this. I have absolutely no doubt. And you're going to drive me on further to try and get this out to as many people as I can.
Yeah.
Because that's the reason behind doing it.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. It's helping people find their, and that's what I think that's how you and I literally clicked instantly, because we'd both had that, trying to find that sense of belonging. And when you started talking to me about, your idea for this podcast, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I would love, and it's mad to think that we're sat here now making that podcast when we sat, we were talking at the, crazy.
And thank you for being part of that journey, because sometimes you just need people to come along and just help you, just put a little bit more fuel on that fire that's just, been, other people have been dousing with water and stuff like that. You need to surround yourself with people that are going to light you up. Yeah. And I hope a little bit I'm hoping to do it with you as well, just having these conversations and these exchanges.
Yeah.
Oh, Jodie, what an amazing conversation.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Thank you so much. I hope it's helped other people listening out there. Whether you are also a fan of the Spice Girls, because that was a brilliant part of the conversation, but all of the things that we've been discussing, it is a journey. And Jodie's a very inspirational person, so please do check her out. I will put some more details about that in the show notes. But thank you for today, Jodie.
Yeah. And one last thing to say, actually, if there happens to be anyone that's listening to this that's resonated with anything I've said about coming out, and you're listening and you're thinking, I've got no idea how to do this, but you'd feel comfortable with somebody to talk to, come and find me. You can speak to me in confidence. If you're listening to this and you're like, I wish I could speak to somebody, I'm there. I'll keep your name, everything confident. But if you want to message me and talk, please find me. Don't suffer in silence.
That's wonderful. So that would be best place to get you on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, probably
profile.
Just come find me on LinkedIn, Jodie Goodchild. You can't miss me. I've got a big purple background on my photo. But come find me. I'd hate to think that anyone listening was kind of resonating with anything that I've said and thinking, I wish I could speak to somebody, because you should talk. So. I've had many conversations with many people that have been too afraid to speak or needed, a friendly voice to help them give some advice on coming out. So if you're listening and that's you, then please,
Brilliant. What a brilliant way to end it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Till next time. Thank you very much. Bye.